course, Mr. Rubangakene, welcome to Big Conversations by Ordinary People podcast. Counselor. Is it counselor or speaker? What is your title?
Of course, what takes precedence is the bigger title.
I see.
So you'd risk a declaration of persona non grata in the Kawempe if you called me cancer.
I see. That makes sense. It makes sense though. It makes sense. Yeah. Thank you for accepting this. We don't obviously take this for granted, and usually when we get people to make time out of their day to come and have these conversations with us, we want to make sure that they understand that we really appreciate this. This is something we build our concept around, but also entirely depends on people's willingness to come and share their thoughts with us.
Thank you very much once again for having me.
Yes.
I think that you guys are doing incredible work.
We are trying. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So I want us to actually just continue from part of the conversation we're having around creating these avenues for people to speak, for people to speak. I think, and part of the reason that we decided to do this, to invest in like cheap ways of creating media, sort of podcasting, doing it cheaply, but doing it with the quality, and also investing a lot in more long form conversations, So right now, when you look at where the big companies are investing, they're investing mostly in gimmicks or short form conversations. So if you go to TikTok, it's 30 seconds of someone doing or like a catchphrase. It could be like a clip out of a conversation that is maybe out of context, so that's funny, and that is what a lot of people are sort of paying attention to, because that's where the media is pushing them.
That's right.
Yeah, but what we try to do, and we know it's some sort of risky approach to like doing business. It would have been much cheaper and also probably more lucrative for us to do the cheap content, the short content, the gimmick content. But we thought, it's worth investing into kind of quality content that will transcend time. So 300 years from now, when we are all dead, when people, right now, when say you get books about Shakespeare, and you read and be like, who was this guy? You have like his content of work to sort of reflect what kind of person he was. And for us in the future, say, 1,000 years, if humanity survives global warming, right? 1,000 years from now, people will have even videos, right? So they see Rubangakene, right? They see you on TV, and they know, okay, this is a human like me. This is what they thought, and some of the things obviously you say could be wrong. And they'll be like, this is what people at that point thought things were, perhaps some physicist is going to figure out that the earth is actually flat in the future. And, we'll be like, these guys in 2020, they thought the earth was what? Spherical.
You're right. Yeah, first of all, thank you once again. I want to, take this conversation a little bit backward.
Sure.
And capture the evolution of media. There's a time when media was, a state monopoly. So the state controlled what the people had to say. So there's limited freedom of expression in that sense. So with more liberalization, we saw that, private players were allowed to come in the media industry. But then that was still hugely controlled. But with the emergence of the internet, especially toward the end of 1990s, then we see a new power, a new force being given to the public, to the ordinary citizens. And this form of media is so powerful because what we've seen is that kind of control, that kind of monopoly, that kind of censorship by the state and other, corporate players has kind of been eroded. Now the citizens have power to really get their voices out there. And young people like you, getting, your stories and your voices, your passion, to reach out to great audiences. And what you're doing and what you already said is actually the important aspect of archiving. As a society, the African society, we have a weakness when it comes to record keeping and archiving. So this is really good. It's a very nice time to be alive.
True. I totally agree. And what we pitch this podcast too, when we are talking to other people, is, one of the things we try to do is also tell stories the African way. You said something about telling stories. And the thing we emphasize is, before, say, the Arabs or whoever brought writing and whoever brought literacy to Africa, before they come, I think they were the missionaries or the Arabs, one of those two. Before they come,
both of them.
So the way we used to like persist, and you said you were poor at like record keeping and archiving, but before the way we used to persist sort of knowledge from one generation to another was through stories. So, your grandmother sits down with you and she tells you about, a time she was doing something, she was going on the road and maybe a snake bit her. When she's trying to tell you, hey, don't move at night, snakes may bite, And this is just how we move knowledge from one African generation to the next.
Yeah, but from the African perspective, that wisdom is not recorded. So it gets lost or eroded with every passing generation. Exactly. And that's why in our accumulation of the Tower of Knowledge, we are far behind the Western world, which learned very early at the onset the purpose and the importance of recording and archiving. So you find that it is easier for a child growing up in the Western culture to easily get this knowledge passed on accurately than it is here in the African context. And it's even surprising when you go at Makerere University, you'll be shocked that you won't find any center of writing teaching kids how to write so well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we largely an oral society, good at talking. But when you ask colleagues, okay, put it in writing.
That's
people will sweat plasma.
That's true. That's true, though. I think I'll be one of the people who would sweat. Before you actually came on, there was a podcast that was that was being hosted here about dyslexia. So this is in Western society is considered, I don't know if mental disorder is the right word. It's sort of considered a disability, right? If you're not comfortable reading, basically, it's sort of if you're not comfortable with symbology, like if you look at things you can listen well and comprehend things if I tell them to you. But if I give you a paper to read things through, it may take a little bit longer for you to comprehend, what's written. Right now in the West, this is considered something that's treatable or something that requires special attention. Exactly. So there are schools, and I know one of there's a podcast I used to listen to by a guy called Eric Einstein, and this guy Weinstein, I think the guy's name was Weinstein, and this guy he got his postdoc or PhD at 26 years, many postdocs, but he claims he had disabilities learning, right? And sort of part of the conversations he has on his podcast is, how to restructure the whole education system around identifying and supporting students who are not comfortable with symbols, who just don't, who are not capable of opening a book, seeing letters and converting them into words and sentences and sort of comprehending them the same way they would have done if it was being spoken out to them. And so the difference between like where the West is and where Africa is, this is writing and symbology is not an African thing, right? So when Westerners come and tell us, say, you know what, we know a good way to persist knowledge over time, by writing, it's now sort of like it's a mental tax on Africans because this is not natural to us. And the few Westerners who are in our position, who don't find writing and reading comfortable, they're being placed in sort of a situation where they need special help, right? But in Africa now, it's sort of the condemnation. If you can't write, besides calling you illiterate, if you had a chance to be forced to go to school, then they'll call you stupid because you're just
I mean it's so serious, and of course that goes a long way to show the deficiency of education system. Number one, that it is a one size fits all kind of education system, pays little attention to some of the deficiencies like you've described. But also, when you pause to think, or if you take your time to look at for example, writing pieces by our professors, with due respect to our professors.
I agree with you fully. Yeah.
And even compare it with a write-up by, say, a mere graduate from Harvard. you see a clear distinction of what culture can do and what the lack of that culture can lead another society to. Because honestly, Africans are brilliant. There is no experiment that has ever shown that the African race is intellectually weaker, inferior compared to the white race. There is no experiment. In fact, on the contrary, African kids who have been given opportunity to study at the same, high quality schools and institutions in the West, on average, the African kids have performed way much better. And there's a story of kids, South Sudanese, who fled during the civil strife, and they went to specifically, I think it was Coventry in London, in England. And so they were integrated in these schools, and all these kids from South Sudan were on top of the pile. So that is show you that it's a matter of culture that institutionally and in our association, reading and writing is a luxury, which is not. I see. So it's something that really I think we need to do better at.
Yeah, no, I agree. So there are two actually lines of conversations here, right? So one line of conversation is maybe it's not Africans that need to adopt the Western way of communicating. Maybe we don't have to actually learn how to read and write. Maybe we have to find alternative forms of doing the work, right? So you mentioned, for example, if you compare, say, mock professors who can't write as well as Harvard graduates, right? The argument here could be that say 16 to 20 years you spend in school. If say the mock professor is say 50 years old, right? If they have spent say 20 years in school, right? And even when you're doing school, you're not spending an entire year in school. You're spending say maybe 60% of the year in school, right? You can't compare that to the Harvard kid who even at home, say for example the language, right? English. A professor can come, he speaks English at school in class, right? So you go to school from 10 to 5, you're in class, and then break time and lunch time. Say from 10 to 5, you speak English. After 5, you speak Runyankore, right? Then the next day, then the weekend, you speak Runyankore all the way through, right? This person, it doesn't get the same comfort in English, expressing himself, saying the language, right, in the official language, as a Harvard graduate who has spent, say, maybe 23 years old, 24 years old, who has spent 24 years old of their life speaking and listening to the same language. So that's one line of conversation.
Of course, there is empirical evidence which shows that learning and teaching in the secondary language creates a sort of a barrier that kids comprehend much better if they are being taught in their mother tongue language. But that's besides the problem. I think that, what we are describing as deficiencies in our education system, our failures to write so well. Because, what is unique about writing is that it reflects the thinking process. Okay. You can't write well if you can't think without clarity. So you can only write with clarity if you can think with clarity, because writing and thinking are inextricably tied together.
That's also, so I don't disagree entirely, but that is also one of those adages, something that sounds right, but if you throw some light at it, I know people who can give good speeches if you write it for them. Right? So if you write a speech for someone, right, and come and tell him what the speech is about, they'll go and perform it way, way better than you, the person who wrote it, would have performed it, right?
That's a different skill, though.
So exactly. Speaking. But my question is, isn't this him expressing thought in a different form other than writing?
That's not his original thought. That's borrowed thought. I'm talking about original thinking and expressing these original ideas in the form of writing, so that other people can understand them.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you. Just a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about a person who speaks impromptu? You know, there are people who don't need recorded speeches, who can say he's trying to rally people to do something, just comes out of the blue and moves them, like pastors and you know, the preachers, right? They don't write a lot, but when the guy comes to do his sermon, he will trigger all kinds of you know, he'll make sure he moves people, right? But that has to be a form of thinking.
Yes, if they
that
are
has
swimming,
to be a form of original thinking.
That's right. But that's on a condition that they're swimming in the usual waters.
I see.
If you ask them to, you know, break new areas, arrive at new knowledge, you'll be shocked.
I see.
These pastors are saying the same stuff now and again.
Yeah, true.
So yes, we have good orators, but in terms of original thinking, really, and I've already said it's not. I'm not arguing that we are incapable of, you know, being innovative and original thinking. What I'm saying is that our culture is such that it inhibits creativity and innovativeness.
No, So I think I fully agree with a bit of the culture thing, you know, inhibiting innovation and whatnot. Although still, I think many people argue that is not very specific to Africans. Institutions generally are structured in a way that in order for them to be resilient, they have to be a little bit evasive towards innovative and predictability things, right? And when you look at, say, most of what they call, say, African culture has been the informal African institution, right? So in say in the West, right, you belong to a family, but you spend a lot of time subscribing to formally declared institutions, right? So you belong to a family, but you spend some time at school, you buy into, say, an ideology, say socialism, you go join a political party, you read a lot of indoctrination content and all that stuff, or you become a feminist or whatever, right? In Africa, your family is the most important institution, usually for most Africans, You grow, you go to school, those are all by the ways. What you really want, say if you're a girl, is to find the right guy who will pay the cows that your uncles will ask for, right? What you want if you're a boy is to probably give your father grandchildren. Oh, I don't know what boys really want. But you know, like most of the African life, the institution around it is not written. So you can't because now, for example, dowry, right? And this may be jumping off a little bit the point, but say for example, dowry, right? You outpay dowry for a woman, right? Even if I don't agree with this, there is nowhere it is sort of formally written where I can go and judge and say, you know what, let us amend this idea on dowry. It is an institution that's established but has no record whatsoever. It's not formalized. So when I say, you know what, I won't pay dowry, Museveni said he didn't pay dowry for Janet. When you don't pay dowry, then you're one of those, either you're rowdy or you're too westernized or you're brainwashed or whatever, right? But yet what happens in the West is, if you want to amend sort of the manifesto of socialism, it is written somewhere. You can have a clear argument with someone else in a debate and say, you know what, I think Marx was just ignorant about this, that's why he mentioned this, right? And then you can reform that institution. Whereas, again, that's my opinion, right? I don't think per se the culture in Africa, okay, I mean, I agree a little bit, but not like the culture in Africa inhibits innovation, but not to an extent that is different from the rest of the world.
Yeah, but you know that culture is an expression of the extent of economic progress.
Let's explain that.
Yeah, and what we are describing mainly are expressions of our social and economic conditions. Yeah, whereas we are castigating the Makerere University professors for not writing properly, you find that the budget that this professor in his training to become a professor that he has to use available to him is maybe not even 1/100th
Of the Harvard budget.
Of the Harvard educated professor.
Yeah, true.
So whereas you go to the West and most of the schools have writing centers that are dedicated to teaching kids how to write so well. At Makerere University, you won't find a single writing center. Maybe it will just be a course unit.
I remember when I was in nursery school.
That's not. Yeah, that's introductory writing.
Okay.
Here I'm talking about professional
technical writing, basically.
Creative writing. For example, for our people who are in the movie industry, you wonder why creative and interesting scripts aren't coming up, or why we are not having movies of the quality of Hollywood. Even if you invested billions of money, you may not improve the quality by, say, 30%. Why? Because there are other institutional factors that must be put right for you to produce that kind of quality. Usually when you produce a movie, it is a confluence and an output of so many people involved. From the director, the script writer, the videographers, the camera. So many people are involved, and all these people involved are bringing certain specific skill sets. So even if you invested the money here, you lack people with the requisite skills to do that. Why aren't these people found in the Ugandan economy? Because the economy is still struggling with meeting the basic needs. So people are not focusing on improving their quality, their productivity, their skills. They are still struggling doing the low level, the bottom of the pyramid kind of jobs, low productivity jobs. And this is where most of our young people are. So when most of the people in the economy are at that level, then you lack skills. And then you have limited social mobility. That's why, going back to the example you gave, a kid in the West will be quickly taken through ideological institutions, political party. Here, a kid who has studied in China Mukaka or Kaba Mushwerenche, where I've come from, studied with Honorable Nyankore, and up to, say, secondary, there is no diversity there. Even when they are lucky and they come to Makerere University, they will join
colleagues of Banyakole.
There was Ankole student, Makerere University Ankole Students Associations. So they never get to learn. So the mobility is also limited. When they finish university, they are stuck in one or two jobs. There is no mobility across within industries, because they have limited industries. In the West, when you stay on more than on a job for more than 3 years, you have overstayed. But here people fight to die on a job for 30, 40 years. So that's why I say that the social expressions that we are witnessing in our society,
what we call culture,
our culture, stagnant or progressive, are determined by our economic progress.
So first of all, I think that you may not entirely be right, rather wrong, but you're not entirely right on this, right? So the first thing is, there is a fact of diversity, right? The environment that, say, 0.0, right? There is one guy in Netherlands, there is one guy in Kenya, there is one guy in Japan, right? Say two people, a guy and a woman, so they have to reproduce, right? So there is two people in these places, right? These are like the West, Africa, the East, right? Two people of each, and then they start raising their children, depending on the environment that they are in, right? The Dutch is going to learn how to swim because he's around water. The African, I don't know, the African is going to produce more children because he has everything, right? Again, naturally, Africa is blessed. The Japanese guy is going to construct because the nature of the environment, the earthquakes and all that, is going to learn sort of the tricks around fighting sort of the environment that he has in order to survive, right? That is just the role of nature. And this is my opinion, right? So when you see our economic status, personally, I think it is a result of the society, right? How much are we getting for free versus how much do we have to actually build for ourselves, right? If you look at Netherlands, a very good example, because Netherlands is the country that was built over water. They had to displace a lot of water to sort of form a big chunk of the country, right? If you look at the kind of innovativeness that those Dutch had to do to serve, to exist, to not become extinct, you don't expect them. If they imported the skill level they needed to survive to a place like Uganda, where such a skill level can help you thrive, you don't expect them to. You don't expect the Ugandan who has grown in Uganda who can just run to the next mango tree and get lunch, right? Because, there's good weather, the soils are fertile, the wild itself can feed you, maybe a snake will bite you, but the wild can feed you as well, right? You don't expect them over time, the generations over time to be in a similar situation because they don't have similar experiences, right? And personally, I think that's what informs a significant chunk of culture, right? So historically, what makes Ugandans or people around Buganda, the former Bachwezi, a little bit pacifist, right? They're not very aggressive people, is because, again, there's abundance, right? So you come to the most given land on earth, there is no point in fighting your neighbor. If you have a quarrel with no neighbor, you can just walk away. For sure, you'll get what to eat elsewhere, right? On the other hand, if you've been in the West, right, and again, if you look at Europe, for example, Europe is the cause of the world's problems. If you look at Europe and how they had to, partition and conquer and unconquer each other in order for them to fit into that small chunk of land that is Europe, right? If you look at a European mentality, Columbus getting on a ship and going to look for India and then landing in the US and finding these Native Americans who are also in abundance, the way Africans are. But his mentality is, in order to survive, you have to conquer others. That is like sort of what differentiates those two cultures, right? It's not that, it's not the economy that is a result, but it is what you've done to survive and how do you transition out of those skills when you're in a place where you can thrive, when survival is not an issue, right? But now, when you get to the question of today, right? When you look at today, what you are saying, the lecturer, it is true, the lecturer doesn't have the resources to learn from Harvard, right? But then the question would be, is it reasonable to invest in the lecturer so they can try to compete with Harvard? Or isn't it at this point more reasonable for the Ugandan to think about where they are good at, where they can excel, right? Let me give an example of Ethiopia, right? Ethiopia would invest in marathons, because they know naturally they have that edge, right? That's actually even, that's not even the best example. Nigeria, let's look at Nigeria, right? Nigeria could have invested a significant amount of money in employment, right? They decided to get money and invest in their film and music, right? Because they knew on the continent they have an edge there, right? And whatever you say about their culture or their quality.
But I hope with the example of Nigeria, I hope you know where the money that they invested in the film industry came from. Nigeria is the biggest economy on the African continent.
Yeah, that's true.
And this is because they had vast reservoirs of oil,
true.
which they sold,
true.
and then the money they could invest in.
True. Okay, So in context, what I'm actually trying to make, the context I'm giving here is, let's say Jamaica, right? Jamaica doesn't have the oil that Nigeria has, right? Let's say Jamaica as well invests in music because everyone in Jamaica who can talk thinks they can what? They can sing, right? So if a society is able to self-reflect and sort of make a genuine audit and say, Ugandans, I don't know what Ugandans are good at, by the way. So I was trying to think of like writing
everything.
Yeah, maybe we are good at everything and nothing, right? But if you know that if as an Ethiopian, right, we are blessed because of the terrain we are in, we are able to run long distances, right? Then what you do is invest a significant amount of resources to show the world that we can consistently be the best at this, right? And Brazil is also a good example. Brazil is a big economy, fine. But Brazil is sort of like an Africa away from Africa. The sort of the economic situation is there's a high level of inequality, but the poor people are really poor as well.
Yeah, maybe I should ask you, when you give the example of Columbus going on voyages to discover new, territories for conquering. What is the motivating factor?
More.
So why does a Columbus
true.
Why does a Columbus go on a voyage to expand the territory and of his country, and then a Chintu doesn't go on a voyage?
True. That's a good question.
Yeah.
My opinion, again, I'm not an expert in any of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But my opinion is the scarcity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So right now, what is equivalent to Columbus exploration is probably what Elon Musk is doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to go to the vast, go to Mars, go to space and whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And his big pitch, the way he manages to raise all that amount of money is, investing again in stories like global warming and, existentialism, right? Creating the crisis. And, I don't know if it's true or not. Okay, maybe it's true, right? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's helping him raise the kind of money he needs to explore space, right? Mm-hmm. So Columbus, on the other hand, grows up in a time where your part of Europe can be conquered. And the reason that, again, Europe is conquerable, in my opinion, it has to be weather, right? So when, what are they called? Those are former Germans, right? When it becomes too cold in one part of German, people have to migrate to the place that has summer, right? Or to the place where the winter hasn't become too tough, But then that place has people, right? Because a significant chunk of the say, for example, in Russia, right? A significant chunk of Russia is not habitable at that point because it's too cold, right? So people have to move, but then they have to displace other people or they have to cooperate with them, right? But usually, again, no one likes visitors, especially in moments of scarcity. When people hear that winter is coming from the east, people are thinking, maybe what? If we let these guys cohabit, what if winter comes here? Where will we be, right? And so it becomes either we can't conquer, we fight them off so they can conquer us, or we share. And usually the result is we conquer them off. And so when you grow up with this mentality, and then you come up with an equilibrium, So the Columbus question you asked, when you come up with an equilibrium, now we know that this territory is marked, right? This is, say, England, or this is France, or whatever. And, Germans aren't allowed to come here and whatever. When Spain, Columbus was he Spanish or English?
Columbus, I think
Spanish.
From North America.
No, I think he went to North America from Europe. So,
okay,
so whatever, European, right? When you come from that area where there is scarcity, where there is fighting to survive, and you say, what Elon Musk is doing, instead of us trying to preserve try to force people to drive cars that use electricity or whatever, let us see if there is a habitable place out there, right?
Yeah, so actually what you describe vindicates my theory.
Okay.
Unless confirms your argument that when you have too much resources, because that's where I started from. That you're least likely to be innovative, that you're least likely to push boundaries and extend the frontiers.
True.
On the contrary, I think that when you have resources, then you have more freedom to innovate, to be more creative, and think of conquering territories. I think that the expedition of Columbus is a byproduct of the desire of his country to expand and get new resources. So it's a result of knowledge. So the society has reached a certain level of understanding where they can no longer be satisfied with what they have. Maybe the question, and these are big conversations, big conversations, which have so many theories with no really definite, provable answer. The question we need to understand is, why were the explorations or expeditions possible in Europe and not possible here? why did our African ancestors remain traditional, whereas the Europeans were fast-tracking, the drive towards civilization?
So
I think that's
so I think that's what I was saying, and I don't know. I think we are disagreeing on this though, right?
Yeah.
And this is why I think we are disagreeing. My argument is abundance doesn't foster innovation. It's necessity, on the other hand, that fosters what? Innovation. And the problem with necessity is when it's solved, the mentality stays as a residue, right? If you know for sure that in order for me to eat, I have to kill a lion, right? In order to eat, what happens with that skill set of lion killing when all the lions are dead, right? So, in my opinion, is Columbus, fine. What you're saying is, it's also arguable whether, the Western way of doing things is superior, right? But Columbus has the Western way of doing things, right? So he's able to build a ship, right? He's able to build a ship that can sail. He's able to mobilize people that can go with him on voyage and things like that, right? I think this is a skill set that he had, even if for him he had it at a time, say, when it's no longer needed to survive, but this is a skill set that has historically helped his culture to exist, right? Because again, there was scarcity of resources, which is what wasn't in Africa. So again, in Africa, because the land is big, the weather is good, there is no point in being aggressive, right? So this is a domestic dog versus wild dog, right? When you bring your domestic dog that knows that the master will come and give me food today, and you put it in the forest, it's going to be clobbered by the wild dogs, because the wild dogs know if the dog comes next to me when I'm eating, this guy wants to steal my food, right?
Yeah, but you see, I've had many proponents of that theory that Africa is underdeveloped partly because it has abundance of resources. But okay. When you read backwards, you find that actually Africa has suffered more starvation. I want more than any other continent. So, in it and by itself, really, that argument is also not.
I don't know if I believe you by that. I like to pass that.
Not very sound. So, we have abundance of resources, but even these resources.
So I'm saying we had actually. My question is not today.
Yes.
So today with the technology that's there, I think we have a deficiency of the most important resource, which is human intellectuality and intelligence, right? I think we have the deficiency of that. But historically, what we needed to survive, the basic stuff, food, water, shelter, it came easy for people who stayed natively in Africa, right? And people who had to fight for such basics also amassed a set of residue skills, right? The word residue, I think, is the best word to describe this. A set of skills that were unintended, that have helped them conquer Africa when they reach to a place where we take what? Food for granted.
Yeah, but my question is, from the start, and archaeological studies show that really life started here, especially in Tanzania, East Africa. So if life started here and the first human being actually stayed on Africa, the studies on civilization also shows that civilization started in Africa. Specifically, I think that's the Egyptian civilization, then spread to the Mesopotamian civilizations.
I don't think
so my question is, if we this is a fact. The first writing started here in Egypt. The first calendar. Again here in Africa. So where did it go wrong? How come that one race moved so fast towards civilization and was able to, overcome most of the ills that, infested the humanity. Whereas the race where humanity began from stagnated and remained behind?
Yeah.
I think that's a fundamental question that we all must answer, and that's the root cause of beginning to understanding these theories that we are putting across.
I see. So two things by that.
Now, for example,
yeah.
I want to take you to the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
You know, it was largely powered by coal.
Yes.
As the major source of power.
Yes.
So coal, I have learned that there are just a few deposits in South Africa. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we've not tried to explore to find whether we have coal or not, but it was a cheaper source of energy than hydro. Mm-hmm. Hydro is just a recent innovation. Yeah. So the Industrial Revolution is mainly powered by coal. Yeah. So when you juxtapose it and see what was taking place in Africa at the same time, you find that Africa was in the darkness. Yeah. People were hunting. People were gathering foodstuffs. They were not seriously into productive and sophistication and building institutions and making transportation easier, curing diseases and so forth. So, and that again, of course, questions the issue of resources.
The question I would ask you is why aren't Africans extinct, right? And the reason, okay, so if you look at this from, let me run for you a mental simulation, right? Man 01 turns from a chimpanzee to a man in Tanzania, right? And then, sleeps with a few chimpanzees. The next iteration of man says in what is around Dodoma, right? Now you and the man, that man has a quarrel with his father, right? So he goes away with a few of his cousins, and they move to Nairobi, right? And they intermarry, right? And the reason they are moving, again, they can move. That abundance is there, right? Nairobi is inhabited. It has chimpanzees, and man knows is superior, right? And then it grows his village, blah, 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 blah. A small chunk of that village, there is a quarrel between two uncles about who should be the lead of the village. So it splits into half, right? The one half goes to Kampala, right? And then, again, human conflict, they keep spreading, right? Yep. So the next man ends up in Europe, or the next man invents civilization in what? In Egypt, right? Yeah. The question of, how come, say, the West today is quote unquote more better than Africa? First of all, is a 2-point question, right? Is whether you believe that the West is better than Africa.
Well,
right?
We must define some.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, in case you do, in a scenario where you believe that, right? Then the question is, since we are natives, right? We are the history of humanity. If Egypt is considered African as well, then we are the history of civilization as well. Yeah. Why does the West beat us, right? Now that is the question of what? If we start looking at recent history, right? When my father was born, the greatest empire on earth was the British Empire, right? Today, Britain is just one small country that no one cares about, right? How come it has been surpassed, right? When my father was born, China had the most poor people in the world, right? Today, China is probably the biggest economy in the world, with a history, with a record of removing over 800 million people out of extreme poverty, right? Yeah. So the thing is, it depends. My assumption is, your time comes, right? Egypt was once the biggest civilization. Rome was once the biggest civilization. Mongolia was once the biggest civilization. Those things don't exist anymore, right? And these are like different places of the earth, right? Different places of the earth. When, I don't know where the coal was invented, but say, if in Europe, the coal that triggers the Industrial Revolution is invented, Europe gets an advantage, right? If the silicon chip is invented in Silicon Valley, the transistor, that invents the microchip is what? Is invented in Silicon Valley. US gets its trigger, right? And of course, there's also negative catalysts. If there is a war, Hitler starts a war in Europe.
So we should wait for our trigger.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there's that. So that's one point. Okay, yeah. So that actually, in a nutshell, is my thing. Is that either we can wait for the trigger, or we can start building incrementally to prepare for again, they say, you get lucky if you're prepared. I forget the actual word, but only the prepared.
Yeah, of course, on a trajectory, Africa is rising.
Yeah.
Really, there are many matrices we can look at, be it the lifespan, be it the literacy rates. Really, when you look at so many measures that we use to measure progress, economic, social, and political, we have moved, made significant strides, if you look back 20 years. Yeah, but the question is whether that progress will be sustained and catalyzed. Therefore, what we can do, how do we make sure that the African starts producing knowledge? Yeah, because I think that we contribute less than 1% of new knowledge
in the world.
In the world.
True. Yeah.
And then you have the Jews, the Israelites, who are globally about 14 million, but they have the most number of Nobel Prizes. And a Nobel Prize is really an award to creation of new knowledge. Forget the Mandelas, with due respect to him and Desmond Tutu and Prime Minister of Ethiopia. Those are peace prizes. You were arrested 27 years, you came out and you were very nice. True. You were a peaceful man, so you win the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm talking about Nobel Prizes in areas like entertainment, like chemistry, physics, mathematics, economics. These are really areas, rewards to highly intellectual works.
True.
So you have the Jews, 13 million, and they have almost a half of all the Nobel Prizes. But then you have a vast, 1 billion on the African continent. There is none. Of course, relatively, the Jews do better than even other European countries and others. So the question is, what is our trajectory like?
And so exactly. I think
this is
the right
where
question.
We need to take the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's the right question.
The future of work, the future of employment,
True.
How we make the African child. I'm always, puzzled by how I can help transform lives of young people in the ghettos of Kawempe, because you have a chunk of them between the ages of 15 and 30, and they are not productive. They are not in work, they are not in education, they are not in employment, they are not in any form of training. They are there. These are Ugandans. We have to grow up with them. They have to live in this country. They are not productive. But that comes at a cost, because that is a potential GDP lost. Because if you're a leader, you want most of your people productive. So we need to, all of us in this room, be concerned with how to...
I agree.
I think
you make very good point. I don't agree. So two things that I'll be skeptical about, right?
Yeah.
Anyone who tries to think that Africa is trailing the West in a way, right? So what that would mean is...
So you think...
No. Let me make my point. Sorry. Right?
Yeah.
My opinion is we are... So the Buddhists, they say, right, that everyone's path to enlightenment is as unique as the person himself that walks the path, right?
Powerful.
Yeah, and that is my sort of wise line that I throw to put people. But anyway, here's the thing, right? The thing about Africans, right, is what if, our trajectory is not to catch up with Europe. What China has done, for example, is to catch up with, is quote unquote, most of Asia is to catch up with the West, right? Yeah. But at a very great cost of humanity, right? So today in China, there are camps, the shit Hitler used to do, right? It's there today in 2021. After we've read all the books, after they've made all the bad films about Hitler, there are camps that are specifically targeting a race, Obai Igwas, I forget how they pronounce that word, in China. right? That is just unbelievable. It's baffling, right? But that's there. And at the cost of that is China now can throw around those numbers, GDP, AQP, Z to Z, those numbers that don't make sense to say that they are close to US over economically, whatever that means, right? China has done good things. The whole thing of getting people out of poverty, making sure people can get basic needs, that is commendable,
and
right?
Constructing roads for Africa.
Yeah, of course, that too. But what if, right? Uganda, our trajectory is different, right? So look at the future right now, right? Today we are poor. The Americans are rich. More people in Uganda die of malaria than people in the US, right? That's a fact. So if you're considering those as metrics, America is better than us, right? We are trailing it. But what if our aim is not to outcompete America in curing malaria, but to go a different way? Yeah. Right now, the biggest sort of technology that's on the verge is AI, right? And what AI is apparently going to do. Also, I'm a techie, so I'm going to just pretend that I don't know what it's going to do. What they say is going to do is displace what most of the West has taken as the edge in intellectual work, right? So stuff like being lawyers, stuff like technical writing, most of the stuff you've been saying, robots are going to be able to do that very well because they'll have all the knowledge of the world. They'll be able to Google stuff and actually review papers. If you write, say, an original paper about how malaria can be cured by eating leaves, a robot will be able eventually to read your paper, look at all the research that exists in the world, that has ever existed in the world, and review it and say, you got it wrong here, you got it wrong here, you got it wrong here, right? That point is going to come, right? What if our trajectory is not to try and outcompete the Americans or the robots in writing papers? What if our trajectory is in a different place, say hospitality, right? Most people who come to Africa who come to Uganda, most people I've met, they say, oh, this is a nice place, right? Uganda right now exports what I mean is very borderline slave trade, a lot of maids to the east, right? What if we can organize around creating human services like no other country can, right? Like no other country can, and offering that as our edge, the way Ethiopians have the runners, the way Uganda can have very nice maids, maids you'd love. I have cousins who work in the US as maids, what they call chair, looking after old people, right? And here it's embarrassing. They come back and have to drive very big and expensive vehicles because they don't want us to look down on them because we are looking at the service they're offering, which is a very human service, as a bad thing, right? Because again, we've set this trajectory that because the Americans are very good, the Jews are very good at math, for us to be very, very, to have the right esteem for ourselves, we have to be equally good at math. But and I don't want to use Jews. Most people in the West, they're going to leave their grandfathers in a home. Yeah? When their grandfather grows old, he's going to become a burden to their father, not their grandfather. Their father is going to become a burden, right? And then an African is going to come and change the guy's diapers, right? This is a service that humanity needs that maybe robots will do in the future, but
are you saying we don't have the old people who need this service here? And maybe also important to ask is the profitability and scalability of that kind of service. Yeah, imagine if we had to export the maids and even if they were open, and they said, okay, give us 500 million maids to do work, take care of the elderly or others in the rest of the world. So who would remain here to take care of the affairs at home? But my point is that even in hospitality, we need to be sure that the strategy we are choosing serves us best, makes us competitive, makes us look dignified human beings, respectable, and we're also contributing towards the progress of human race. Because sometimes when we discuss as Africans and Europeans, Americans, sometimes we sound like we are different kind of creatures. We are part and parcel of the human race. So if the Americans progress or the human beings in Europe progress, it simply means that there are other human beings who are still trading, our destiny as humanity is the same.
Okay.
We can be at different stages of civilization, different stages of institutional organizing, but very, very surely we occupy the same space and our destiny is the same. And I'll give you an example, there is a paper I was reading which shows that the poorest man on earth today enjoys better health than the richest man did 20 years ago.
Yeah. I read Steven Pinker's book.
Yes.
Enlightenment now.
Yes. Just think about that. That the poorest man enjoys better health than the richest man was able to. So that shows you the progress we are making
as humanity.
And even these classifications, the boundaries we create in the form of countries, Uganda, Tanzania, continents, Africa, these are fictions. They are stories we have told ourselves in order to manage society. But at the beginning of times, there's nothing like Europe, there's nothing like America. These are labels we've created. And sometimes when I'm discussing with colleagues, usually we have exchange programs and talk to students from the US. Ask them, but you say you're controlling migrations, your country, but who gave this to you? Apart from man sitting somewhere and say, these are boundaries of America, and he writes a law. These are dead black and white letter. And then he creates military. But maybe with a different legal regime, we could be talking of something completely different. So I think that it takes us back to the issue that we should accept that we are dragging. I think we are trading others in terms of the development, and we must get our politics right. We must get our economics right, so that we are able to properly contribute to the progress of humanity.
The way I want to sort of move the conversation forward is going to seem like I disagree with you, but believe me, you're making very valid points that I totally agree with, right? The thing, right, that for me really makes me skeptic about most idealistic young people that I've had a conversation with is, first of all, idealizing the West as sort of the place we have to go. And I understand, if you look at this rationally, that Steven Pinker book I was telling you, right? If you want to see how many people die while giving birth, Africa leads by far. If you want to say how many people sort of have basic needs, people eat, have enough and enough to waste, Europe leads by far. If you have those quantifiable metrics, almost by all of them, the West is in a better place, right? But the West itself comes with a burden of problems. These things, right? These things that we trail at, they come at a very huge cost, right? And for example, for the West, a significant chunk of the US was built by Africans, right? It's just not by their will, right? So this is the same question in China, right? A significant chunk of Chinese development has come at a great cost of humanity, right? Human rights.
Is it greater than the cost of being underdeveloped?
I think so. 100%. 100%.
Would you choose to be Uganda, not China?
Me personally, 100%. Every day of my.
Really?
Yeah. So here are two reasons, and I think this is actually where I was going, right? In China, right, you will choose what you call development, right? In Uganda, first of all, I'll tell you that in my life, right now, right, I can afford food and all that, right? Today in Uganda, right? In China, you probably find some person who's 10 times as rich as me who can afford all these things as well, right? But what this guy has is the right that, rather what this guy doesn't have is the right to his own privacy, right? If the guy if I texted a joke to my friend, a very good meme I saw on, say, a Western website, and I texted it to my friend and it's insulting Xi Jinping, the guy will come for me, right? First of all, China is too developed. The proportionality, it is too developed and too unfree to the extent that, first of all, Xi Jinping will know, okay, not Xi Jinping, but someone who is in charge of knowing for Xi Jinping will know that I've sent that text, but it is very punitive, yeah? In Uganda, two things. First of all, Museveni doesn't have the capability to know when I send a joke to DC him, unless, of course, I've tried to make it public, yeah? But also, it's, I mean,
so assuming you had the capability.
Yeah, well, if you had that would be a different
in
country.
Rwanda, we could use the example of Rwanda.
Yeah, good.
Rwanda, they have the same level of censorship.
Yeah, true.
You could say they have constrained freedom of expression.
Yeah.
More or less of China.
Yeah.
But they're still
they're poor. But that's the thing is, so Rwanda, I would rather, that's actually the better question. Would you stay in Uganda or Rwanda if you were to choose? Would you choose Rwanda over Uganda? Because Rwanda, the way they're strategizing and planning to develop, at the expense of human rights, is a straight line. It's very predictable. It's like running a company, right? Where you draw charts and say, in 10 years, we are projecting this and this and this. Rwanda, most of that stuff will be achieved. Because again, the way they are running Rwanda is like it's not a human society, right? It's like it's a business of goods and services, right? Same thing they're doing in China. It's like the Chinese people are goods and services. We used to negotiate with what? Other companies, other nations like the US in order to grow, right? And the question would be today, right? Uganda with all its curfew, would you rather live in Rwanda than live in what? In Uganda? For the same amount of money?
I think really this is a hard question. It's a choice between economic progress and civil liberties.
And human deterioration. When you say civil liberties, you make it seem like freedom is an option like poverty. Some people can be not rich, but some people...
But it's possible also, as in the case of Uganda, to have minimal development and also not have free liberties, because
I agree with that. True. So that's a good point.
For example, in media, you know that the state usually controls what a mainstream media reports about. So of what use is it to pretend
that's a good point.
to be free
That's a good point.
at the cost of development, and yet you still remain unfree?
Okay, so that's a hard one. I'll be honest. The thing though, the way I see this is the nature of Uganda, right? Today, is that we've not committed as Ugandans, right? We've not committed to development, to economic development over humanity, right? The way I see it, what I see in Rwanda alternatively is because again Rwanda, there is sort of, what's the word for one opinion? There is no dissent at all, right? It's like literally not there.
So what I think really is that if the two countries, Rwanda and Uganda, maintain the same trajectories, Rwanda in 20 years will be a freer country and more developed country than Uganda. Because Uganda will develop at a much slower rate, and Rwanda will develop at a much faster rate. And, research shows that when a country develops...
I think I know the research you're talking about.
The time reaches where...
The liberties are put at the forefront.
Yes, the middle class starts agitating for liberties.
I see.
If we maintain the social structure and the economic structure that we have in Uganda, what happens is that you have people who are incapable of demanding for their rights, and that's very bad.
I see.
So in a sense, you're nurturing a very, very bad dictatorship. It doesn't go away. It remains stable.
True.
So
okay. Again, it's unfortunate that I have to be on this side of the mic, but I totally agree with you on that. In the end, according at least to the history of many countries, when development comes in, then the question of liberty comes back on the table, right? But
and maybe let me also add that maybe there is too much negative media about China than actually what is the place. I'm not in any way defending the democratic record of China, but I think there is a lot of positive about China than is reported in the media.
No, I agree. But I've seen John Cena when I was a kid. I used to be a fan of John Cena. I would go put on wrestling and pray that John Cena beats people.
I
just had to grow up and realize that the whole thing was a performance. I used to think it was a real thing, right? But I saw John Cena. He made a joke, I think, about China. And I saw him apologizing because this movie he's in, F9. Is it F10, F9? Formula, the thing with Vin Diesel, the fast car movies. He was in, makes a huge number of sales in China. And China has the government that can ban the whole movie.
China?
Because of a joke that John Cena made, right? At that place, where even being rich, this guy here of Alibaba, where even being rich does not liberate you. Because you're at the mercy, you're on borrowed life, right? Everything you do is only good if it is good enough for the guy who gives you life, right? That is not freedom. There is no freedom at all in China.
Because let's not forget that China is being out of poverty, barely 50 years. That's short a period of time compared to how many other democracies like the USA took to be free. Remember that the USA liberalized and gave rights to women to vote just recently. Just around 1960s.
But don't confuse that with freedom. Don't confuse that with freedom.
What is freedom?
So here's the thing.
No, what is freedom?
No, here's the thing, right?
Just a moment.
Okay, please.
Where do you put a bar?
Where do I put the line?
Where you say women are not supposed to vote. Where the blacks don't have equal access to justice.
That's I see. So you want to corner me in the slave trade game, and that one I think is evil.
It's all freedom.
I totally agree, right? So okay, again, here's the thing, right? You look at the US, right? Right now, the biggest conversation in the US is whether the biggest conversation around human rights in the US is whether I can wake up tomorrow and force everyone to call me a woman, right? They call it transgenderism, like gender fluidity, right? That is the biggest conversation in the US, right? 10 years from now, right? When the Americans have fought that fight for us, right? China is going to have gender fluidity, and they're going to quote what you're saying, right? They're going to say the US in 2021 did not allow what? He, right? That stuff, right? At the point where women were not voting in the US, it was the norm, right? It was the norm. At the point where black people were slaves in the US, Africa was a colony, a territory of England, right? So, like, if you put it in the context of what the world was, if you compare 54-year-old US to 54-year the world today, it is unfair to say that US was unfree in 1954 when there was no Uganda at that point, where Ugandans were just what? Colonial subjects of what? Of the Queen of England, whatever, right? Today, there's a country called Uganda. There's a country called the US. There's a country called China, right? All these countries are sovereign, right? And now we measure them on each one's basis. Which country is more free? Not which country was freer last year.
So I think you indicate the point that I was making. That once a society progresses economically, then they have the latitude to extend certain rights, and it also takes time to break certain social forces. Social processes are very painstakingly slow. So China may not have developed as strong institutions, social, economic, and political, to give the kind of rights that you're talking about to the Chinese. America enjoys that. But I also agree with you that, of course, we are always extending the scale of rights, and America are always at the front line. Yeah, they are the ones to, give rights to the minorities.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can afford that.
Yeah.
They can afford that. And the discussion about, for example, the transgender conversation, and we're like, all right, US has facilities to create, for example,
Shared bathrooms.
yes, bathrooms and other facilities at
I
schools.
agree with that. Yeah.
But in a context like Uganda, where kids are still studying under the tree,
True.
say that you create bathrooms for the gents, for the females, and then for the transgender, is not easy. So these social, economic, and civil rights, some of them have a huge impact on the economics. So they must be achieved with certain level of economics, of resources, sorry.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the one factor that though you're not putting into consideration, and I agree with you, right? At least from the countries we see, development is sort of directly proportional to freedom to a certain limit, right? Let us look at once upon a time countries that were almost considered to be at the similar level, right? The USSR and its counterpart, the America, right? The West, right? What happens is Russia manages to defeat Hitler, right? The mistake they make, right, is fall for the wrong ideology, right? So Russia chooses to go with a communist perspective, and they, again, if you read Lenin and Marx's the manifesto, the Communist Manifesto, it's very, very beautifully written. So, you can forgive people for thinking that can be actually well executed, right? But what happens is, again, the fundamental mistake that Russia makes is the same mistake that I think China is making, is thinking the idea of Russia or USSR is more important than the people that make Russia, right? And so that is the difference between what America does. Because America decides, or the West say, I think America is not even a good example. Britain, right? Britain decides to say, the individual, right? We are going to base, no, actually that's America, I think. We are going to base this, whatever we are doing, the society, on the rights of the individual, right? While Russia says, we have Russia, we are going to base this on the society, right? The idea, this human-made idea that this is Russia, what you just said, someone signing on a paper in black and white, becomes more important than the actual living, talking human being with a soul, right? And this is what China is saying. So China throws around numbers like, people are free, blah, 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 blah. No, not people are free. People, we have GDP, we have 90 ABB, all those vowels that don't, short forms, abbreviations that don't mean anything. China can throw them around. But what they're selling is this idea that some guy wrote on a paper called China, right? But the actual people in China, if the richest, okay, not the richest guy, but one of the really rich Chinese comes out to just criticize indirectly the government, if that guy can be penalized to the extent that he can't even come back and talk on the internet, then what about you?
So the classic distinction between the USA and the Chinese model of development is this, that in the USA and the entire West, they have what we call individual capitalism, individual liberties, market freedoms. Okay, in China they have what we call state capitalism. So that's why you see most of the companies constructing roads across Africa are state-owned. So, meaning that still in China, you won't have enough middle-class economy, which is going to, challenge the state on certain rights. But that notwithstanding, by the mere fact of economic progress, people continuously ask for freedoms.
But
and you remember the student protest in Beijing?
I've seen that.
There have been so many protests. That would have been unheard of in Mao's China.
There was a protest in Mao where Mao killed all those students.
Yes. So what I'm saying that, of course, progress will take time.
So I think my point though is progress to where, right? if we set off from this point, and I go this one, you go that way, you're making progress to where you're going, and I'm making progress to where I'm going, right? But if we want to measure this global progress as one thing, right? We've seen that the country that experimented with this idea of putting imaginary words over humans, Russia, USSR, the state apparently owns a company, we don't know what the state is.
I hope you know that Russia has since abandoned its mode of communism.
Yeah, Russia has
and is moving towards state-controlled democracy.
It has moved towards Ugandanism. What Russia is doing is the civil thing. I think civil.
I hope you know that the Chinese constitution expressly states that China is we call it a dictatorial democracy. No, it's a dictatorship with democratic tendencies. Yeah, so they express state that a dictatorship with democratic values.
And so the problem with that is in the US, you grow up knowing, however unrealistic this is, that you can become the president. If your ideas are strong, this is unrealistic, I agree, right? But if your ideas are strong enough, and if you do the right things, you can lead the free world. Let me first finish my point. Let me just finish my point, right? Yeah. In China, this is beaten out of you from childhood. You're told, if you want to join politics, join the party. Respect the party, and maybe if you're lucky enough, if you're chosen, if the powers that be the state, that erosion the state, if the state looks upon you and it says, oh, this guy is worthy of being a leader, then you'll be a leader, right? So as a kid, the idea of individual flourishing is beaten out of you, right? Versus in the US. So even if these two countries are progressing fine, I think that destinies cannot be the same. One is a mental prison where people feel that they're not complete until they're part of China. The other is where rebels can come, where if you disagree with the state, you feel like you're free enough to take up arms, you're legitimate enough to take up arms and even challenge a constitution, right? So in both those worlds, me, I want to live in a world where I'm not sure whether I'll eat tomorrow, but I can take up arms and fight for my freedom tomorrow, rather than living in a world where I'm being fed. Nice. Let me first finish actually this analogy. I've thought of something very nice. There's a writer called Nassim Taleb, right? Nassim Taleb makes an analogy called the turkey analogy. What's it called? Okay, so let me just explain to you. So when you have a turkey, right, you buy a turkey 3 months to Thanksgiving, right? You give it food every day. Right? The turkey is so happy, You're feeding it to become fat, so you eat it on what? On Thanksgiving. What the turkey doesn't know, that at the climax of its happiness, the climax of its happiness is the day it's supposed to die, because that is when it has gained the required amount of weight for the owner to eat it, right? And I feel like people who think the Chinese or Rwandese model works, they're the turkey, right? If you don't have the right on who is feeding you, that person, at the point where he decides what they did to Jack Ma, at the point where he decides you're fat enough to be eaten, the man is going to come and slaughter you. Although in the US, maybe the turkey will not have eaten as very fatty food as the Chinese, but that turkey will live to fight for his death.
So, two observations. Number one, I think again there's a very big bias against China. You describe it quite more dimly than the realities actually show on
I saw Jack Ma.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. I was a bad experience. But again, I think that each system has its own positives and negatives. Whereas the US model has been successful, let's also not forget that about 10% of the country, of the people in the country own as much as the rest.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Just think about it. That on a whole, as rich as the US is, that is owned by 10%.
Apart from Scandinavia, is there a country where it's more distributed than the US, where wealth is more distributed than the US, apart from Scandinavia?
Let me come. Okay. So when you compare the situation in China, you find that the vast majority of the resources of China are owned by the state on behalf of the Chinese people.
Oh, come on. You don't believe that.
So
you don't believe that the state, you don't believe that the Ugandan state, okay, we're going to continue, but that is just a fallacy, right?
Yeah.
The Chinese state is its own sovereign individual. It owns things to buy guns, to make sure that people stay subservient. It doesn't own things on behalf of the Chinese people. The only reason Chinese people are alive under the Chinese state is because the state needs them to negotiate with other states.
So my point is that the Chinese society is more equal than the US society, and if on average a Chinese is better off than an average American. Of course, that is using economic measures. But when you go to
economic measures, I don't think that's true. I think although Chinese have come out of extreme poverty, a significant number of them, they are still Chinese who are within the extreme poverty line, who live below the extreme poverty line, and even the extreme poverty line for the UN, by which they measure the China's success story, is very different from what the poverty line, the American poverty line, right? When it comes to economics, there I have to check the numbers, but I don't agree at all that the average Chinese, because China has 1 billion people,
is actually better.
No, I don't agree with that at all. Because first of all, the American economy is bigger than the Chinese, still bigger than the Chinese economy, and China has 1 billion people. Oh, no, GDP per capita. Can you Google GDP per capita for China so we can see?
If you don't agree, actually, yeah, but you see, GDP per capita is going to mislead you, because they will get all the money in that economy and they will distribute it according to the population. But when you look closely, you realize that the wealth is within the hands of only 10%. But the other 90%.
In China, no one has the wealth, though. No one has the wealth. So you're saying these people are all poor, they are equally poor.
No, that's what you're saying. That is not true. Because if you say in China, people have no wealth, you're saying that people don't own companies. You're saying that people have poor health.
No.
You're saying that people have poor transportation.
I'm saying people don't own companies. Yeah, but that is what I'm saying. I'm saying you can go and get in thinking. This used to be Cuba. I don't know what the state of Cuba right now, but Cuba, you couldn't own anything, but you could go and get cured, right? Yeah. In Uganda, say for example, you can go and pray, right? You don't own churches. Yeah, so like having access to service and being actually rich, I think are different things. In a country like China, where the state owns everything, right? And you live at the mercy of the state. You can't call those rich people.
I don't think that the state owns everything, actually. The strongest and the biggest companies in China are state-owned, but there is also individual entrepreneurs.
But those can be, the state can just snap and take that away.
Well, that can be urged. And I'm not in support of China, but I'm saying that its model of development has positives. And if they democratize, which is inevitable, there will be a stronger economy than the US. And I think that all the indicators show that.
All right. So let's move on a little bit. I think it may be hard for me to look at the sympathetic version of a country with no freedom, right? But let us now move to Kawempe here, where you're doing all the work, right?
Yeah.
First of all, explain to me, what does it entail? Like, what is the JD sort of for the councillor and the speaker in the council?
So, you know that in Uganda we have a dual system of governance.
Yeah.
By the virtue of Article 176 of the Constitution, 1995, we established a mode of governance known as local governance, whereby districts became the basic units of governance under the spirit of decentralization of services, powers, and functions. So Kampala is a special district, or is a special unit as a capital city. So we have 5 divisions: Kawempe, Nakawa, Central, Rubaga, and Machindi. Yeah. So that the role of the councillor is mainly representation. The seat to what is equivalent of a local parliament.
I see.
Yeah,
I see.
yeah.
Okay.
That's our parliament. So it is representation, it is oversight, it is legislation. At the national level, parliament makes acts of parliament. Those are laws that are binding on the entire country, and they are the supreme. Then at the district level, we have what we call ordinances, which are laws that govern the jurisdiction of that district, and are not supposed to contradict laws made by parliament. So at our level, at the division level, and the division in Kampala is equivalent to a municipality. So we're a municipality.
I see.
We make what we call bylaws. So those laws govern
That
people
region.
that stay within that jurisdiction. And
still these laws can't contradict the national
No,
laws.
they are not supposed to contradict any higher law.
I see.
For example, you can't make a bylaw that contradicts an ordinance made by KCC authority.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Okay.
Yes, so we are supposed to monitor and evaluate service delivery to the people of Kawempe, and also, of course, do representation. And representation is you pick really a serious issue and give it political force, so that those who are responsible can act in a responsive manner.
Yeah.
Exactly. So me as a speaker, my role is to preside over the council meetings, and the council, like I've already said, is the supreme lawmaking organ of the division.
I see. What is the budget of this council? For example, how much money of the Ugandan budget is spent on Kawempe Division Council?
Well, that is not known because powers have not been fully devolved to these divisions.
Okay.
We still depend on City Hall.
I see.
Yeah, but that is illegal, of course.
Okay, first explain that to me. What is the ideal situation and what is the current situation?
The ideal situation, according to the KCCA Act, is that we are supposed to collect local revenues, make our own budgets, and have an operational account, meaning that we can say, okay, we have 5 billion to spend this financial year.
I see.
And then we allocate it according to the perceived priorities, and that money is sent to the division account, and then we do the expenditures, and then according, of course, to the plans. And then after account, and then go to another financial year. That is not what is happening. What is happening is that KCCA budgets for these divisions, so they come and tell you, oh, you have this. But even then, they don't send the money to you. They actually do all the procurement, everything for you.
So when I wake up in the morning, I see guys sweeping this road. You're saying that should be managed by the division, but KCCA is instead doing it.
Well, when it comes to roads, specifically sweeping, because there is road construction, that is one aspect. Then there is road maintenance and cleanliness and hygiene. The hygiene and the cleanliness aspect is managed by the division.
Okay, I see.
So we have a circle. People organized in circles, so we have people who sweep and the supervisors. That circle is managed at the division level, but they are paid by KCCA. Of course, that's a wrong model.
I see that. So the other thing that now I would want to understand, right? In your opinion, isn't the division now, rather the division leadership, since it's almost incompetent, impotent, actually not even incompetent, impotent, it could be competent, I don't know the competence level, but since it's non-functional per se, right? Don't you think it's just an expense on the normal Uganda now? Because if you have to pay your salary, yet whatever you're supposed to do technically the KCCA does, why wouldn't you be, as the speaker of the division, asking that your job and people who share your job be terminated instead?
Well, I don't think that impotence would clearly describe what is actually happening, because even within that restrictive environment, I think there is still some good done by the political structure and the division. However, it could be much better if we were fully empowered as by the law established to do what we are supposed to do. That's why we have been in court. That's why we are fighting to make sure that the center can no longer exercise these powers which have been devolved by Parliament to the divisions.
I see. First, explain to me the case. I don't think I've heard of there's a case right now in court where divisions want to be able to execute.
Yeah. So last time the mayors came together and went to court over the continued exercise of powers and functions that have been devolved by the law to the divisions, but KCC is still doing that. Yeah.
So you say that the division in Kampala is the equivalent of the municipality in other anywhere else, right? Yeah. What is the situation in the municipalities? That means so
the municipalities, for example, if you go to Mityana municipality, the Mityana district, those are two administrative units. The district has its own budget that it manages.
I see.
And the municipality has its own budget that it manages.
I see.
Yeah. So if for example we're given our powers, would say, for example, want end garbage problem in Kawempe. So would prioritize garbage and put the money there. But now we can't do it.
Because KCC decides what it wants to prioritize. I see. And why is that? Why is it that? Is it after Museveni tried to overthrow Lukwago by introducing the authority? Is that how the things got mixed up, or has it been like this for forever?
No, this is an expression of the bigger problems within the KCCA, that in the design of the law itself, the spirit was bad. Yeah, the spirit was, number one, politically, Kampala
true.
is the hotbed of opposition in Uganda.
Yeah.
So the central government, whereas the constitution, by the spirit of the constitution, is supposed to be decentralized, the central government still wanted to remain with control over Kampala. That's why there is a position of the ED. That is not supposed to be there.
Yeah, I see.
So that was a parallel structure to check the political power. Okay. So Lukwago is there, but more or less ceremoniously.
True.
Yes, with the amendment now he has an executive, but still that one is executive director. All administrative work, or the technical work, or the planning is done by the executive. So that's the spirit of the law. But also because of the bad governance environment in this country, even what the law has said should be the structure is not implemented deliberately out of bad spirit. Yeah, because again, it's up to the the feelings of the people in the NRM whether or not power should be devolved.
Yeah.
When Jennifer Musisi was the ED, when people were being recruited ultra-vires, outside the law on a contract basis, they were being hired by KCC, whereas the right procedure would have been through public service and on a full-time basis.
I see. So there are two things, right? I know a significant number of people who work for authorities, right? I have a good friend who works in URA. I have another good friend who works for this thing for electricity, right? But although these are government entities, they're allowed to run as businesses, basically. Their structure. So if you go to say URA, they have fine commissioners and whatever, but their structure is like to run like a normal business. You have targets, you invest within the company on strategies on how to meet these targets. And in the end, although what probably would be profit, I think even actually a significant number of profit, anything that exceeds the target that say the ministry has set for URA is used within URA to make URA business more efficient, right? And I think it's the same thing with the electricity generation, right? Still you have targets and whatever, and the government foots some of the budget, but if by some chance you manage to do this more efficiently, the excess you use it within, like sort of profit, you reinvest your profit, you use it within to make this thing work efficiently, right? KCCA is an authority, right? So my thought on this is that KCCA should work like that, right? How is KCCA different from? Okay, two questions actually. How is KCCA different from URA in terms of organizational structure? Because you brought up the hiring thing, but also how is KCCA now different from Ginger Cities? Ginger CC, maybe Ginger, I don't know what they call it, Ginger City.
Yeah, so number one, KCCA is a special kind of authority. Because unlike URA, which is an authority of government set up to collect tax, with an executive director whose role is to manage a staff, maybe let's say 200, 500, whichever number it is. KCCA is a political administrative unit.
Okay.
With about 1.8 million resident people,
true.
and about a population of 4.8 million people during that time who come there. So KCCA is better. You're better off comparing it to a local government unit, like let's say Mukono district. Because this is a political establishment.
I see.
And even the creation of the authority and what, this is political gerrymandering at play. Creation of distortions, because you want to curtail politics. It's a result of the intention of government to manage the people of Kampala. But purely, it should be more or less of a local government unit. But the other special thing about Kampala or KCCA that is not shared with other cities like Jinja, Mbarara, and so many others is that this is the capital. And even by the constitution, I don't remember whether it's Article 5, I think somewhere in the schedule of the constitution, they talk of a number of districts, and Kampala is mentioned as a capital city. So it's a special entity. It's a physical area, yes, but it must be treated in a special, because this is the capital, this is the center of power within the country.
I see. So let's talk about your job. Like what would entail your day-to-day tasks? So for example, when you wake up on Monday, what does that mean for you? Presiding over the division parliament is one thing, but what is that job? What does that mean? What is your job description?
So let's talk about my job. Ideally, if we are operating in a normal situation, it would be that of a Speaker of Parliament. But at a much lower level, because you're supposed to receive opinions from the people, from the councillors. But the biggest responsibility of a speaker, anyway, or at Parliament, is to chair the meeting, so that the decisions can be taken. Because before a budget, for example, can be spent, you must first pass it as a budget. That is a statutory instrument. It's a law. So ours is to make laws. So at that level, we are supposed to make a bylaw in the form of a budget governing for Kawempe. So of course we have to take it upwards to be approved, since we are not completely autonomous. But we also have to take decisions that are administrative. but that bind on the division.
Yeah.
Decisions on service delivery, decisions on public management, decisions on environment, every aspect you think about, apart from those that have been retained by the government, but all those functions which have been devolved to the local, especially like things like education, health, HIV/AIDS mainstreaming, garbage collection, security, and others. Those the council decides. So usually when we are not having a council meeting, we are seated in the office and receiving people. These offices are public offices. They are supposed to be accessed by people.
I see.
But we also operate what we call the committee model. Most of the business of council is handled at the committee level. So we have 6 committees.
Okay.
And each of the councillors is supposed to be a member of a committee. So the departmental heads.
As well.
No, we have 86 councillors.
In the division?
Yes.
Oh,
so
okay.
when you divide by 6 committees, that's about, 13 members per committee.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, so departmental heads bring their reports to be evaluated and discussed at the committee level.
Yeah.
So that, remedial decisions can be taken where the ills or mischief or problems or better plans incorporated. So that's how we run. Yeah. Then we also have a business committee, and that's what decides what goes on the order paper. So the business committee is chaired by the speaker, but then it has the other members are the chairpersons of committees.
I see.
Yeah.
So that is ideally what's supposed to happen.
Yes.
Yeah. First, give me. It doesn't have to be like extremely accurate. Like what are those things that happen in your job that you just have to improvise because that's the nature of the politics in the country?
Well, first of all, in terms of the structure, for example, I don't have salary yet.
Oh, what?
Yet the position was created, I think, more than 14 months ago.
So the salary for the speaker or the salary for the councillor?
For the speakers.
Okay.
So our councillors earn around 2.8 million.
Okay.
Yeah, but the one for the speaker has never been decided. So I've been running around. The minister, according to the law, is supposed to determine the salaries of political leaders. But because of misinterpretation of laws, and this is the danger of having incompetent people in offices, someone is empowered by office, he says, no, I need to go back to parliament to get authority to decide your salaries. So the position of the speaker was introduced towards the end of last term. So we elected speakers in March last year. Those people ended their office without being paid. And we have taken over as new speakers, but we have not yet been paid.
Well, so what does that mean when the minister now knows? Does that mean there is back payment or the other guy is?
I think that's what they will have to do. That's the right thing to do. If they don't do it, we'll go to court.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, but also in terms of infrastructure, where you're supposed to sit, you go to an office and there's no electricity. You can't sit there. But this is Kampala capital city. This is Kawempe, one of the biggest revenue contributors. Yes, as you know, about 70% of our budget is collected here in Kampala. And that's a problem. Yeah, but that's a discussion for another day. I don't want us to digress. But we make that contribution, but then you don't have an office where the division speaker can sit. So I was telling you that in terms of office setup, we still have challenges. Speakers don't know where to sit, but also council. We are supposed to have council chambers, just like you see City Hall. Of course, even the City Hall compared to the authority. of the city hall, it's too far below the standard, especially when you compare it to the one of Nairobi.
Okay.
Far much better than ours. Yeah, but the point is that that as it may, we still don't have council chambers, so we have to sit at hotels. And every time we sit at hotel, we spend 9 million. That is not cost effective.
That is per sitting.
Per sitting, spend 9 million on the hotel.
Oh wow.
So that's a lot of money.
Yes.
But also it undermines the sacredness of the council. Because this is the people's house, the people's parliament. We are exercising the authority of the people. The people are the sovereign.
Yeah, and I see what you mean.
And then you find that we are seated somewhere in a hotel as if we are on a wedding. It takes away the symbolism, it waters down.
So what does this mean also in terms of like the corruption thing? You know, how much do you get to give a hotel a good deal? So you'd be sitting at the guys, if I have my hotel and I wanted you guys to come to my hotel, the budget is 9 million and I said, come and sit for 4 million and you share the rest. How often does that happen?
No, actually we don't decide that. We put in a requisition to KCCA. So the money is paid
so it's
from
the guy in
center.
KCCA who makes that deal.
Yeah, we have what we call public procurement and disposal law, which guides how you can procure services or goods on behalf of the public, or how you can dispose of public goods or services. So it's the city hall. But in our case, we have decided not to go back to hotels as a protest. So we'll be sitting in the communities. And I think my last special council was in Katanga, because we sat in Katanga there in the slum. That's where we organized our council.
I see.
So most of our councils will be sitting in the community. We look for tents, we sit there.
I see. So, okay. So in terms of mobilization now, for example, right? You said there are some division councillors who are in NRM.
Yeah.
Right? In a situation like this, where you're protesting, are they also on board? Is this like the Americans say bipartisan? Is this something that is multi-partisan, where all councillors agree that hotels is not the right approach? Or is it again an opposition thing where only opposite, because you're the leader, you're the leader, I'm assuming, because the majority of the councillors are no, right? Or they are opposition, okay. Is this the decision that NRM councillors also agree to, or is it a decision that that is an opposition decision basically?
Well, number one, the law gives the speaker powers to decide the time, venue.
I see, okay.
Where the council meeting can sit. So that's administrative.
Yeah,
so
that
time we're having an induction and moderator, the facilitator was joking with the councillors that the speaker can even take you in his compound. The law empowers him to do that. But of course, what you're asking politically is relevant, because if the councillors are opposed to the venues you're taking to them, then it's likely to backfire on you. The advantage I have is that majority of the councillors, including the NRM, agree with my arguments that it is not cost effective to have council in hotels. Yeah, so they support this kind of protest.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of say progress, right? If you look at this as a trajectory, 5, 10, 20 years from now, do you see Uganda where, for example, the division is more empowered, or do you see Uganda where the division is gotten rid of once and for
all? First of all, I think that we are getting rid of the NRM government very soon.
Yeah, okay.
And as soon as we remove the NRM junta, we shall restructure We have, ambitious and far-reaching reforms in terms of government institutions, in terms of administrative units. We don't agree as the NUP with the so many districts that have been segmented. Actually, the NIM talks of decentralization, but it's a districtization policy. It's just create the districts, but they are not accompanied with corresponding increase or improvement in service delivery. So we have to do away with that. We have to cut down public expenditure on the number of MPs. I think would cut it by about 80%. That parliament. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. It will be a complete overhaul. Yeah. We have to rethink the architecture of governance in this country because we must be concerned with the value for money. Yeah, I think we are over-governed, but in that over-governance, there's it comes at the cost of service delivery. So we must correct all those things like RDCs, this expenditure on.
That's been a good point you raised, right? Yeah. The role of the RDC. What is that, and what role does it contradict in the local government?
Spy for the president.
Okay, that is. So officially, what does the president tell us he's supposed to do?
The RDC. Well, according to the Local Government Act, the RDC is the representative of the president. Yeah. So he's the head of the security in the district.
Oh, so the president is ideally the head of the security in the country.
Yeah, the chief.
Okay.
The commander in chief. Those people think that we have the thief in command. Yeah. So that's your RDC, but that's a funny structure. So you have cows and you have town clerks, and they are not empowered to do their jobs. From 7, it's all about political corruption and survival, in the politics of survival and regime longevity. So that kind of environment does not drive economic development, does not drive social change. Instead, it is a very big obstacle because in our current environment, you're spending on the most unproductive people. Actually, there is an American author, I don't know if it is, I don't recall his name, but he said that the economy, he was referring to the Brazilian economy, that it grows at night while the politicians are asleep. So in the case of Uganda, I think that the little progress we achieve is at night when the politicians are in their bed sleeping.
Or in the bars.
In the bars. Apart from congesting our roads with lead cars and those cars and those so many vehicles, they are busy rushing to go and do what? Because the speed with which they are, chasing people out of the way doesn't reflect in their administrative decisions and service delivery. Yeah. So we're going to now conclude, but I just wanted to get a picture, and I don't know how comfortable you are sharing, what your goal is. And let me first give you my assessment. And when I had the guild president once on the podcast, I tried to share with him this exact thought. In my opinion, the regime is intimidated by competence. Right? We've had a very good conversation. I think most of the things where we've disagreed, I'm not sure that I'm right as well. We are that place where you've made extremely valid points. If you can challenge me, I'm like the lion. So that right? Expressing intelligence is a big threat to the regime, right? If you want to
if politics is really a thing you want to pursue long term, right? Where is the compromise going to be? And I think, I don't know, you don't seem naive to me to think that there is a way you can work in the regime while still maintaining some sort of competence, while people can have coherent conversations with you and you share like real ideas of how things can actually work. Unless, of course, I think some of the competent people, or once were competent people, people who don't hold any kind of political positions or any kind of public positions. If you look at this old man in Bank of Uganda, I think once upon a time was competent. Yeah, but again, and maybe the people who advise him, who we don't know, those probably have some level of competence, but that is the price.
Are you that now he's senile?
He's old. There is no way you can be competent at that age. Yeah. There is this guy they hired in finance. People say it's who put him there, the former lecturer. I have my skepticism for him, but again, no. Okay, I don't. But okay, my point is, where are you going to make the compromise, to grow politically? Are you going to stay in opposition forever? There's success in opposition, right? You can be Elias Lukwago. Elias Lukwago is the epitome of competence. But, he's stuck where he is. You can be, you can switch sides. You can join the junta, be put in sort of administration somewhere in public service, and you help actually streamline things, if you have like an eye for that. I'm not actually sure where like your specialty is specifically, but you seem like you have a clear picture of the big picture. You're very clear-eyed. Also, alternatively, you can join an NGO, be Nikopio. Say politics is for, hooligans, and you go and start your own NGO. Where are you looking to? Or, obviously the government can fall and you can build things. That I'm very, very skeptical about. But where do you think the compromise is going to be most likely as a ladder for growth for you? Or, again, politics, you can be Semjunganda, you can go to the next step, contest for parliament and, further and further. Where are you looking to go? Where is your trajectory looking?
No, honestly, I must concede that that's a very hard question. I don't know if it's unfortunate or fortunate for me. I have kind of options. I have the academia. I have a passion for the academia.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I can pursue the academic line and become a professor and come back and lecture.
Yeah, I see.
That's also
you're extremely well spoken.
Thank you. That's my passion. I actually
I see. Okay.
Don't know how I ended in politics, but also I think that as young people we should be concerned about how we are governed.
True.
Yeah, because I think that politics determines everything, and I've heard many young people and others say that politics is dirty, they can't go there. But life is about politics. And it is the politics that decides what you achieve in this society. I can assure you, politics decides everything. Everything.
I see. The price of
anywhere, everything you think about is determined by politics. So we need more of our talented people in politics. Of course, the space and the kind of environment, the violence, the intimidation, it kind of scares away our best brains from participating. I read an article where I think it was Useful Serunkuma asking the likes of Godbert Mushari, the likes of is this Dr. Wakida, the director of Research World International, and many others, brilliant, well-educated people in various industries who are doing well. People would think that if these were in government, these were in administration, our politics maybe would be doing better. And I agree because, historically, government is an aristocracy of knowledge.
Yeah.
So it was asking a question, how come that our politics has attracted people that we perceive to be of poor quality?
Mm-hmm.
That's a crisis.
Yeah.
That's a crisis because you want your best in a politics. When you look at the founding fathers of America, these were serious thinkers. They put down an infrastructure in form of a document, guiding document called the United States Constitution that has guided this nation to prosperity and greatness.
Yeah.
So the job of governance and building the nation is a serious job that needs serious and dedicated thinkers. But you're not going to get that if the environment is corrosive, if the environment is toxic. But the question is, who then creates the conducive environment?
I see.
It is through participation
of
young people, and that takes sacrifice. And that brings me to your question. I can assure you, without fear for contradiction, that I can never cross to the NRM because I am convinced that it is a bad government composed of a small group of people who decided to come together to eat on behalf of others. And all they are concerned about is eating and entrenching their kinsmen and those around them. These others, from these other regions, they are just co-opted to make sure that they sustain the eating, to dress it up, look like nice, but it's bad. So I can never support them. And the beauty is that for me, I'm not a man who is driven by money. So there's no amount of money you're going to give me
I see.
that makes me cross the NRM. I am satisfied. I come from a very humble background, whether that is bad or good, but it gave me a training of being satisfied with little. Number two, I think that many people wonder how we survive in a very hostile environment in politics in Uganda. But I have meditated about death quite a number of times. And I've realized that the fear of death or the fear of going through horrible experiences can control you.
It's the biggest mental prison.
Yes, it can control you in far-reaching ways. You can even stop doing what is right because of fear of what is going to happen. Yeah. So I have come to terms with the fact that whether I die 80, 100, eventually we all are going to disappear into this horror of infinity. We are all sometimes. So I don't know, we have a saying in the opposition, Tema Jakaruba. I don't know if it's a bad or good attitude. I would like to live longer. Longevity is of the essence, but it no longer controls me in a way. Yeah. Of course, I try to be careful. Yeah, but I am committed and dedicated to making sure that I make a contribution. So, in a nutshell, when I try to go around my affairs, I'm trying to balance politics and the academia. Mm-hmm. Because I think that full-time politicians are also not good. Yeah. You need to really continuously study your society, understand theories, and do research so that you are able to, in an exacting manner, diagnose what the problem of the society is.
I see. Yeah. I mean, that's quite powerful. That
thank you.
If you start a church now, you have a. so the other thing, though, right?
Yeah.
Steven Pinker.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before he writes this book, he writes a book around violence.
That's
right?
Must be Harvard professor.
Yeah, the Harvard professor. That's the guy. Yeah. So he writes a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, right?
Yeah.
In which he argues that if you look at the written history, violence has been reducing, right? And that's sort of the big argument, right?
Yeah.
And sort of most of his work is quite optimistic, right? And that is sort of the optimistic argument that he's laying, right?
Yeah.
That the more we live, the more we learn. We may worry when there are small agitations here and here, but on the longer trajectory, violence is reducing, right?
Yeah, tremendously.
Yeah, tremendously. But then that brings the question, right? So other people who think the book is nonsense, like again, one of my favorite writers as well, called Nassim. Nassim says it's because Steven Pinker just doesn't understand statistics well enough to make sense of the data, right? Which his argument, is simple like this, right? So if you draw a graph, right? The trajectory is simple, that violence is reducing, but that graph has spikes, right? So what Pinker doesn't account for is the potential, right? So at some point, even if at some point when the Americans bombed Japan, even if violence was reducing, even at that point, I know, like when you look at that world where you think violence was increasing, but even at that point, compared to the wars that happened before, violence was still reducing at the bigger picture. But now we have the weapons that can, end violence, one violence to end them all. We have like those nuclear weapons too that can, they have the potential of extreme violence increases, even if actual violence is reducing on the graph. So that is there's a thing called so if you're like say on the forex market and you're trying to understand, to predict how certain stocks will perform depending on all these other factors that you've known in the past that have influenced how the stocks are performed, there's a sort of way of doing the statistics. Nassim writes about things he calls fat tails, right? So the whole thing is a distribution can just become, it can have very small, say for example, violence, right?
Reflections.
Yeah, exactly. It can have, you can see that, this distribution is going down, say violence is decreasing, but then it just needs one spike like this of violence to sort of invalidate all the data before, right? And so I think Nassim is like, he came to fame for predicting the crash, the stock exchange crash. And so there's that, right? And my point was, when you look at the current politics of Uganda, right? Put it in scope with the current politics within the globe, whether within the continent and the current politics within the globe, right? When there was the Arab uprising, a lot of people thought it may trickle down to sub-Saharan Africa. It did not. But also, when the Arab uprising was starting, not many people thought that it would take Gaddafi, because Gaddafi was the Arab strongman at the point, right? But in terms of consequences, Gaddafi had by far, rather Libya, not even Gaddafi, because Gaddafi died, but Libya had by far the worst consequences, right? Because of the uprising, right? If you look at Uganda today, we've seen in Mali, there was a coup. We've seen in, what's the name of this country? Guinea. There was a recent coup. And people don't want to say Uganda, but our president came by a coup. So, but if you see, from your own predictions, right? What do you think is the likeliness, the estimate of change by violence? And I don't care if you believe in it or not. What I want you to give me like a genuine assessment of the potential of change of regime by violent means in Uganda. Oh, South Sudan, I forgot to mention South Sudan. It is, okay, so I want you to consider that also as a form of violence, the kind of uprising that happened in South Sudan recently, in North Sudan, the real Sudan recently. What would be assessment of that, or do you not have an opinion?
Well, I have colleagues who have considered that question before, and we're trying to study the coup d'etats. And one main feature was actually the fact that the toppled presidents were civilians. A civilian president. And I want to marry that with the statements of Pierre Lumumba a Kenyan lawyer who said that somehow, I think he was commenting about the transition scenarios of Uganda in the aftermath of the disposition of Bashir of Sudan. I said, Museveni somehow immunized himself against, these weaknesses that have taken other strongmen like him. And when you look at the military, its composition, its command structure, kind of indicates what he was saying. It's very, very, very hard to have an uprising in Uganda. And that uprising leads to military takeover. Usually must be from the inside. But what you see from the inside is that now the son, Kainerugaba, has actually placed almost on key units, his boys, so to say. So does that mean that all is bleak for Uganda? No. Does that mean that I predict that there's going to be a smooth transition through an election? No. Yeah, but I also know something about human nature. That when the suffering becomes unsufferable, people become ready for the inevitable. I see. So we are seated on a time bomb, and there is a need for a national dialogue. Because in the case of Uganda, there is some sort of resentment that might, if violence erupted, express itself in the form of a tribal conflict. Genocide or something. Yes, that's most likely. And whenever there is a sort of a protest, it almost immediately comes out. Yeah, it almost immediately comes out. So that will be even very, very, very dangerous. Yeah, but ultimately, of course, it would be very hard, or it would be a big lie if anyone told you that I exactly know what is going to happen. We can wake up tomorrow and the guy is dead. I also he's going to die, but anything can happen. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, so, but from the opposition point of view, ours is to really, really continue mobilizing. Ultimately, the efforts of our leaders like Besigye have been really, really successful. Those with his activism and his political participation, we can say that we have achieved in terms of the governing scale. And now there is a new challenger, a new kid on the block. I think this is the final. There's the final challenger before we have victory. That is Bob Wine. And I can tell you that these 5 years, the next 5 years, are going to be the hardest years for the governance of Mr. Museveni. Very, very hard. Yeah. So the other thing, Charles Obo. I don't know if you know the columnist. Yeah. Charles Obo wrote. I read. I think yesterday. On I think the Daily Monitor. He was trying to analyze Saleh's situation. Yeah? So Salim Saleh has been the anonymous kingmaker. He called him the kingmaker actually, right? The guy who pulls the strings of the puppets, right? So the uncharacteristic of Saleh is now in the forefront. People know he's camped in Gulu. In Gulu, sort of in the barracks, doing what patronage stuff, basically. He's also leading, obviously, Operation Wealth Creation, but a lot of what he's doing right now is sort of solidifying alliances, paying people to be on the side. It's a bit complicated, but Obo wrote in the article, Obo is arguing that what Saleh is doing, when you put that into context and also look at appointment of very lightweights in government
top positions, right? If you see the VP, if you see Nabanja, if you see even he didn't say the speaker, the vice speaker, but if you look at them, most of the heavyweights, the actual politicians who could stand their ground, have all been sidelined. And what Charles was arguing, that maybe that is what a transition signal, that maybe we are preparing for transition, we just don't want to make the transition when there is like someone who can irritate us, so we put all these puppets we can control, and so Museveni can step aside smoothly while sort of Nabanja and whatever keep working for him indirectly. The Russian thing, where they put Dmitriev and Putin was, everyone knew Putin was the president, but so something like that. And he also implied that there is a law that is probably going to be passed around increasing the powers of the prime minister. And again, this is because they want to set up Nabanja, who's the right puppet, who's also Muganda, so which is a good play on the tribal politics as well, to sort of help the transition. And I don't know if you have any speculations on that. I know the article is all pure speculation, but I just wanted to see if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, again, what I know about Museveni is that he's a selfish individual. His goal is to die in power. So
that is what he said on his birthday.
Yeah, his goal is really to die in power. I don't think that he's even thinking about Muhoozi for now. But about Salim Saleh, his camping in Nguru, I think it is mainly economical, not even about alliances.
Oh, I see.
To have alliances, Saleh doesn't have to camp in Nguru. Why Nguru of all the districts in northern Uganda is in Nguru mainly because of the gold. The old reservoirs, old gold mines in Nguru, and the SFC has cordoned off that area, so people are. So whenever Salim Saleh has camped, just do some research. You'll find that there is a resource. When he was in Kasese, it was about the minerals in Kasese, the phosphate and what have you. There is a time when he was somewhere in Tungama, and there were also some mineral resources there. So his deployment is strategic. It's about the economics.
Oh, is Saleh still in the army, or is he retired?
I think Saleh is still an army.
Okay.
He's an army officer. Yes, he still is. So it's another.
Okay. You've demystified that for me.
Yeah, it's another.
I thought deeply about this, and when I read Charles's article, I sank deeper into the rabbit hole. So yeah, let's go. I wanted you to tell us before, we go away.
Yes.
The legacy thing. What is that one thing you feel like? This is the one thing I wish I could do if it was within my powers. And when I do this, I'm ready to retire and plant cassava in the village.
I think, I don't know. For me, my passion is really seeing more people productive. Our productivity levels are very, very low. Our skill levels are really very low. And that's partly why I want to go into academia, so that I can build strong education institutions that are able to, because I imagine we must be having Einsteins, Isaac Newtons, who never see the light of the day because of lack of opportunity. We have so many young people, fellow youth, who are languishing there in ghettos for lack of opportunity. And that is lost potential. This is all wealth that is lost. You can imagine how many roads go unconstructed, how many high standard hospitals, how many, sophisticated infrastructures die because there is this lost potential. So my really area of focus in terms of study, in terms of intellectual concentration, is going to be on how to improve, number one, our work ethic, as a society, but number two, how do you improve productivity of a society?
I see. So basically improving the country's human resources, basically empowering that one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't know if I can pronounce your first name. Is it
Akamupulira
Rubangakene? Why don't you have a Christian name? Those are the easy names for people to pronounce.
No, I usually I don't know. I used to some point as Harris, at some point government knows me as Justice. But man, there is no white man called Akamupulira.
I'll call you Rubangakene.
I ever had a white man called Matovu. So I said, okay, enough of colonialism.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. I'm still arguing with my woman of whether we should give our child what.
Should convince her.
I doubt.
Convince her.
I doubt.
Yeah, but it's okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you for accepting. This has been by far. I'll be very honest. I tell people when they come to the podcast that this is the best conversation. This time I really mean it.
The other times, all right.
Yeah, this is the best conversation I've had.
Thank you.